Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the 31 Days of Horror. I'm your host, Moon616, and thank you once again for stopping in, guys. Yes, 31 Days of Horror Volume 8, Day 3, coming at you live and direct. And now Day 3 is always a special day when doing the 31 Days of Horror, because it's my birthday. Yes, and I had to rock the Happy Birthday to Me shirt. That was just a given, right? Anyways, I digress. Alright, so Day 3. Day 1, we started off in the US, then we took a trip to Mexico / Sweden, and today we are going across seas to Spain with a film directed by Uncle Jess Franco. And it's actually one I've never seen. This one just got released from Severin, I think within the last year, I believe. Yeah, and this is one I knew about, I'd never seen before. I mean, who's actually seen all of Jess Franco's films? That'd be like literally crazy. I'm like upwards around of 100 films for Jess Franco, which is only like half his filmography, which is crazy when you actually think about that and put that into perspective. It's just a nutty career he had. But anyways, directed by Jess Franco, and we got one called Dracula, Prisoner of Frankenstein. Now, what a title is that? Like, when I first heard this, I was like, of course Franco did a Universal Monster Hammer horror type thing. And, but, you know, of course, putting his own spin on it. Like, if you've ever seen Jess Franco's Count Dracula film with Christopher Lee, now that's a really interesting take on the Dracula story, which I really enjoy that film. I think it's really cool. So I'd seen that one a bunch of times. So I didn't really know what to expect going into this one, because I'd always heard people say this is such a bizarre film. It's like a really weird take on, you know, a unique tale of these characters and stuff. So basically this one follows our main character, Dr. Seward. He's basically the Van Helsing of this movie. They don't use the name Van Helsing. But anyways, he's examining a girl that just died. He notices that there's a couple punctures like in her neck and stuff like that. And so he figures that Dracula's back up to his old tricks. Anyways, it cuts to him finding Dracula's castle like right away. And he basically goes in there with a wooden stake and kills Dracula. And when he kills him, he turns into a bat. And then we get introduced to Dr. Frankenstein and his monster, and their little sidekick, their little hunchback sidekick. And basically, Dr. Frankenstein wants to go and recover the body, which now when I think about it, I don't even know how he knew that he was even dead. But anyways, he finds his way up to the castle, where he takes this like dead bat and stuff like that. And his goal is to resurrect Dracula and basically have mind control over him. So they set out and they go and find like a burlesque dancer, singer, whatever. They kidnap her because they need her blood to resurrect Dracula, in what he does. And his end goal is to basically start up this like army of Draculas to basically terrorize the village people in this small village and stuff like that, like all these gypsies and stuff, have control over them and stuff like that. So basically it's up to Dr. Seward to, you know, battle against these people and stuff. And then there's more to the story and stuff, but we'll get into that in a minute. Anyways, that's the quick little synopsis on the film. Now, my thoughts on this one. This is a really bizarre film. It really does live up to the uniqueness that people have been talking about. What I noticed in the first like 15-20 minutes of the movie, there's almost no dialogue in this movie. It's just shrouded with like, you know, gothic, you know, atmosphere and stuff, and it's really atmospheric, and it's shot really well. I really like the way it's shot. It has that, you know, that period piece atmospheric gothic feel to it, like through and throughout. It's pretty awesome. I think the costumes, the locations, everything is really on point in this one. Yeah, so it does feel like a really nice throwback kind of film and stuff. But yeah, through the first 20 minutes, basically the only dialogue you get is like basically inside Dr. Frankenstein's head. You know, every time they cut to him, when he's thinking something, you know, it's a voiceover. And that's pretty much what it is. And it kind of goes like that through the whole film. I noticed on the back when I was just about to do this review, it even says it has very minimal dialogue. And I'm like, oh yeah, totally. It really does. Throughout the whole film, there's not a lot of dialogue. There's a little bit with like the gypsies and Dr. Sewell. But, you know, overall, like every time Dr. Frankenstein talks, it's like a voiceover, but it just relies on its atmosphere and its bizarreness of these characters. It's just a really fucking wild movie, actually, to be honest. The Dracula is played by Howard Vernon, who has obviously been in tons of like Jess Franco films and stuff. So, and he actually doesn't say anything in the film at all and stuff like that. So, but this is a really odd film. It's like it doesn't really have a bona fide plot to it. It's like a sequence of events that just leads up to to this third act where it just goes completely bizarre. And then in the third act, we actually get a Wolfman character. We get this gypsy that conjures up this Wolfman to go and fight off, the monster and Dracula and like all this stuff. And it's really bizarre. And there's this really bizarre twist in the third act with Dr. Frankenstein's character, who figures that he's been done wrong, and like he goes off and does what he does. It's just a really, really strange film. Like I said, basically you could tell the whole film trying to tell the synopsis of the movie, because it's like scene by scene. It's just like, it's like sequence of events that just lead to the end of the movie. It's a very quick watch though too. It only runs about 83 minutes. And it's funny when you're watching it because you're so enthralled by the fact that there's no dialogue and you're just kind of watching this atmosphere kind of, flow the movie on. Like it kind of floats like the wind. It's really interesting. It just rips by, but it's very, very bizarre. I will say, like, the makeup on the characters, like Dracula looks pretty standard. It's pretty basic. It looks pretty cheap. The monster, Dr. Frankenstein's monster, looks pretty cheap. Like you can see, I mean, it might be the high def transfer by Severin too, but the makeup effects aren't really the greatest. And in fact, like there's no real transformations and stuff like this. Like, like when Dracula, when he gets killed, turns into a bat, it's just a cut effect and stuff like that. So there's no real transformations. It's very cheap overall effect-wise, which actually kind of has a lot of charm to it. I really like the score in the film though too. It's done by Bruno Nicolai, the Italian composer who did the music for tons of great films. Does the score for this, which I thought was really interesting because you can tell this movie's super low budget, but then again, this is 1972 too, so it's a little bit earlier. I want to say maybe earlier in his career. I mean, he's probably done a lot of films up to that point, but whatever. But yeah, like the overall, I've never seen a film based on Universal monster characters as bizarre as this one. It's odd. It is really, really odd. And actually, I forgot about like the Wolfman, the effects on the Wolfman. I actually laughed out loud. I was like, oh my God. I didn't think the monster could get any worse, but then they showed the Wolfman. I was like, oh man, this movie has so much charm. It's amazing. But it's actually really bizarre and really fun to watch in such a unique, good way. This is a great, like, late night drive-in type film to watch. Like, it's funny because you're trying to take it serious because it's shot well. It's got this really dreamy, throwback atmosphere and stuff. But then it's just, like, so odd in itself. I just think the whole premise, there's such a better movie here. Like, if you were to explore the fact that, like, Dr. Frankenstein has mind control over Dracula, and he's creating this like army of vampires. Like, for the greater goal would have been the better film, but it wraps itself up so quick, and how Dr. Frankenstein kind of turns at the end. It's like so bizarre in itself, but I gotta say, man, like I really enjoyed it. All the women in this movie were super beautiful, very, very beautiful to look at and stuff. But yeah, it's definitely it stands on its own. It's very unique. Kind of going back to what I said about Count Dracula too, Jess Franco's Count Dracula. I mean, this is way more bizarre than that movie. But that movie is a little bit more, I think, to the story. I think he kind of focused more on the story in that one, like the original story. So it comes out a little bit different. But very odd film. I had a blast with this. I'm going to give this one probably about a 7 out of 10. It's really fun. I couldn't believe the transfer on this too. I was expecting it to be super shitty. For some odd reason, like I don't remember this movie ever having a release before. We did 1972 on the podcast years ago, and I think I looked for this one but couldn't find a copy of it to watch at the time. Obviously this Blu-ray was not out, but I mean just like online, and I couldn't even find anything because I knew Franco has done so many movies. Like there's always tons of films from every year. If you're prepping for a show, you're always going to watch Jess Franco films. This is one I couldn't find. But pretty fun film. Not really a whole lot more to say about it without giving the whole thing away. I mean, even telling the bit of synopsis that I told you is like pretty much the whole film. It's just crazy. Like it's so hard when the whole film is just really has no plot. It has like very minimal story. It's ridiculous. But there is more to it that I didn't say. So I give this one a shot, man. If you're a fan of Jess Franco, this is definitely not one of his more sleazy affairs. In fact, this one doesn't really have any nudity in it actually at all. which is interesting because this is about the time when he started doing a little bit more sleazy films and things like that. So, but yeah, The Beautiful Women, no sleaziness really, relies on the atmosphere and the horror. And I mean, I wouldn't say there's a lot of blood and gore in this one. There's blood, but yeah, it is what it is. Here's this. I gotta point one thing out there. There's this really bizarre scene when he's turning Dracula back into like human form, and they use a real live bat, and they basically have it in this like medical jar, whatever you want to call it, scientifical jar, and they're just like coating it in blood, and this thing's like literally like licking it up and shit. It's just a really awkward, strange moment in the film, but I thought it was fun as hell, man. Dracula, Prisoner of Frankenstein. What a title. What a fun time. Good grindhouse late night film. Yeah. So that's going to do it for day 3. Day 4, I'm looking forward to, because it's a film I actually had bought a couple years back and was going to do that one also on last year's, which I did not do, as you guys know. So I ported that one over. I kept it. Didn't watch it. So I'm looking forward to checking it out. It looks pretty damn cool. Anyways, I will check you guys tomorrow. And as usual,